Hello everyone, my name is Sona and I've created 2 on-demand video courses for busy doctors who want to study for the OET. Here's a lecture from our Udemy OET Speaking course, OET Insights. Let's look at how you can decode the roleplay when you get it. So first of all, what's the very first thing you do when you look at your roleplay card? I've got an example for you. You can have a look from the download or have a look on the screen in a moment. Where does your eye go to first? Is it your role as a doctor? Is it the task itself? Well, if you're doing either of those things, you're actually doing yourself a disservice and making life harder for yourself. Because what you should be looking at is in fact the setting. And that's the first thing you should be looking at. Where is this role set? In this case, it's in a paediatrics ward. And in case you're wondering about pronunciation, paediatrics ward. So why? Why is the setting so important? It's important because it helps you understand the situation and gives you an idea about your patient and how they are feeling. Remember, relationship building is such a key criteria of the OET Speaking subtest, and it's very important you know how your patient is feeling so you're ready to empathise, sympathise, etc. This roleplay happens to be set in a hospital. You are a doctor on a paediatric ward in the hospital, so what? What does that imply for you in your role play? Well, is it likely that you know the patient and the patient's carer, in this case her father? No, you're not their GP. You may not have met them before at all. And even if you have met them, you've probably only met them as part of a medical team performing the surgery and post-operative care. So maybe you've met them once very briefly in passing, or maybe you've not met them at all. In any case, you don't know them very well. What does that mean for you and your patient or carer in terms of relationship building? For example, do you have to introduce yourself? If so, how should you do so? Think about how the patient and the patient's carer in this case is feeling. The child may be uncomfortable and the father may be projecting that feeling and feeling the same way. He may be worried or anxious. Think about how you can respond to him in an appropriate way. Think about how you can reassure him and advise him about his daughter's care. So all of these ideas will start coming to you as soon as you focus on setting, and it only takes a moment or two to do that. Next up, I've got for you some typical settings for role plays. Let's think about how they will affect the relationship you have with the patient. For example, in a GP surgery or clinic. What's the situation likely to be like? Well, you probably know the patient. They may have been with you some time, or they may be new to you, but in any case, the setting will be familiar to the patient, and it's unlikely to be an emergency. How will the patient be feeling? Well, of course, that depends on the reason why they've come to see you. So after you've understood the setting, then you go on to the task to get a better understanding of what to expect in terms of the patient's attitude and behaviour. An example of this could be the patient's broken their leg and has come to see you about returning to work. How do they feel? Well, perhaps they're bored at home, and perhaps they may not be very compliant with your advice. Maybe they've come in demanding that they need to get better immediately. These are all things you can prepare yourself for. Another situation could be an emergency department, an A&E, accident and emergency department. In this case, the patient is probably someone you don't know. You won't know their history apart from maybe some brief case notes that you have. The patient themselves will be in an unfamiliar setting. It could be a distressing situation for them, as this situation is probably an emergency. So how will they be feeling? They could be in pain, they may be stressed or frightened or upset. Think about how this may make them react or behave. Perhaps they're a little bit more aggressive than normal, or perhaps they're a little bit more anxious than normal and they come across as being very difficult. So think about how the situation, the setting will make them behave and react. An example of this could be the parents of a 3-year-old boy who've come to you for advice. He suffered an anaphylactic shock. How will they be feeling? Well, of course, they'll be anxious, they'll be nervous, they'll be terrified, they may be very angry. Perhaps they've waited a long time, perhaps they don't know what's happening. So it will be your job to explain all this to them in a very reasoned, calm and sympathetic way. Another example could be in a hospital ward. So not an emergency this time, but an actual ward. You may or may not have met the patient before. In any case, you're not likely to know them very well. You're not their GP. So think about the relationship you would have with them. How will they be feeling? Well, of course, it depends on the situation and why they're in hospital, or if they're a carer, why their ward is in hospital. An example of this could be you're doing a pre-anesthesia evaluation of your patient. So things to think about: how will they be feeling ahead of their operation? Perhaps they're anxious, perhaps they're terrified, perhaps this is a routine operation, they've had it many times before, for example. But how will they be feeling? What kind of questions are they likely to want you to answer? And then another one, very different situation this time, is a home visit. If you're going to a patient's home, you probably know them. You're probably their GP and they have called you into their home. Because of this, you are therefore a guest in their house. The setting is familiar for them, but how do they feel about having you there? So of course, your patient's mood and behaviour will depend on the reason why they have called you in for the visit. In any case, it's probably some kind of situation, a condition that prevents them from leaving the house. So how will this affect their behaviour and their attitude? Maybe they are embarrassed to have called you in. The busy doctor, you're the busy doctor. They are taking up your time by calling you to them. So will this perhaps make them play down their symptoms? Maybe they pretend it's not as bad as it is. Or, on the other hand, maybe they're very happy to see you. Perhaps they get very few visitors and you are a rare treat for them. So how will this change their behaviour and how should you react to it? An example of this could be a patient who has been suffering from severe panic attacks and is too afraid to leave home. So again, their condition means that they can't leave. How will they be feeling? Will they need you to advise them, to guide them, to reassure them? Perhaps they might be aggressive or difficult to talk to. These are all things you can prepare for once you know the setting. So looking at the setting then is really key to getting a good start to your role play. You'll be given clues on how to proceed, so make a note of it and use it to your advantage by preparing appropriately and getting ready to start your role play effectively. I hope you enjoyed watching this lecture. If you found it useful and would like to get a great discount on the courses, please click on the links below. Good luck with your studies and see you again soon.